you very much. Thank you, everybody, for attending this talk. So yeah, I'm an algorithms researcher. I don't work in artificial intelligence. So what I give you, or try to give you, is an honest and loyal view from the trenches, basically, from people who actually work in algorithms, which is possibly interestingly different than the view you get from other people. The exception, of course, is the talk right after me. So don't go away. This is far from over. The discussion here can be seen as spanned by these two directions. One is we don't really agree on how plausible a scenario of a true apocalyptic superintelligence is. So when I write apocalyptic superintelligence, I mean the scenarios described by, for instance, Bostrom of an artificial general intelligence vastly outperforming humans in all cognitive questions. Possibly with malevolent or just indifferent consequences to our survival. So we interestingly disagree on how plausible that is. And we also disagree on how useful it is to talk about this scenario, independently of how plausible it is. So the plausibility spectrum is spanned by people who claim that the singularity is near. It may happen in 10 years or 100 or something like that, very, very close within human history time frame. And others who claim that, no, it's not at all here. The singularity is far. On the other axis, we have people who say we should really, really worry about this. Many of them are in this room. And other people say that this is nonsense to the point of being embarrassing, and we're like worrying about overpopulation on Mars, as is famously claimed. But actually, I can make this drawing even more nasty, because there are even people who claim that talking about this has negative utility. So not only is it laughable, it's actually directly counterproductive, because there are real dangers given by digitization and automation, if you want narrow artificial intelligence algorithms. And we are confusing ourselves about the dangers posed by these, and in particular about the solutions that we could use by having a wrong model of what an artificial intelligence is. And most people I know sort of fall on the diagonal on this axis. So at the top right, this is a heat map, and I've done a completely unscientific study of where I think people mostly are. So at the top right corner are the people who worry about catastrophic AI risk, which are in this room. At the bottom left corner are completely decent and intelligent people that say that no, this is exactly what we should not worry about. Instead, there are much, much larger problems having to do with surveillance or labor market or censorship or hate speech online or whatever it can be that are much more that we should worry about. We're wasting precious intellectual resources and confusing the conversation by having an unrealistic model of what AI actually is. And then I guess most of my colleagues, I think, are on the bottom left corner of the positive quadrant. That this won't happen, and it's just a tinfoil hat, embarrassing nonsense. So I try to be in this talk to disagree with everybody and try to position myself up here. I do this partly as an intellectual exercise, but I think I've convinced myself that this is the right position. So I will make as good a case for this position as I can, and then you can shoot me down. I think it's original, but I may be wrong about that as well. Right, so the upshot is that I don't think this will happen, and we should really worry about it. and I will give you three different analogies which help me to think about this, or maybe lead me in the wrong direction, but I want to mention this to you. So the first analogy I want to tell you about is the monster in the Library of Turing. So this plays off a wonderful novel by GoCAS, The Library of Babel, which is a neat fantasy story about a universe that only consists of hexagonal library rooms like this, and see tiny people walking around in these enormous rooms that are filled with books, and every of these rooms has exits in the north, south, and so on directions. You can go up and down, where there are identical rooms with even more books in there. And the conceit of the novel, of the short story, is that every single book ever written is in there somewhere, and everything else is in there as well. So every collection of letters is in there somewhere. So in particular, of course, this library contains all books also written on planet Earth. It contains my thesis, it contains today's newspaper, it also contains tomorrow's newspaper. Right? So every sequence of text is in there somewhere. The story is about the plight of these poor librarians who try to make order of this scenario and to try to find some kind of reason in this vast overflow of information. And they have some secret groups who think that if you wander north 5 kilometers, there's a really good book there. It's a wonderful story, but we use it here mainly in order to gain some way of grasping the size of exponential growth. So it turns out there's a wonderful project on the internet that tries to visualize this. And it is, the library of Babel.info. So somebody has taken this idea and simply digitized this. So you can write the name of any room, let's say room 15. There are many rooms, some of the names are much longer. And in this is room 15, we see it from above, you can see 4 walls with books. I can choose any of the 4 walls of books, like this one, this shelf, and then I can take the middle shelf, and on the middle shelf I can take this book, and I can look up on page 231, and here it is. So this turned out to be complete garbage, of course, on this particular page, but somewhere, this is the point, if I had made different choices, I would actually have found my thesis, and again with different choices, I would have found tomorrow's newspaper. So that's one of the ideas we need to keep in mind. The other then is the idea of Alan Turing in the 50s, the father of computing, who in the 50s realized that computation would encompass thinking. So he said it seems probably that once machine thinking method has started, so a way of operationalizing thinking so that we can make it into a machine, it would not take long to outstrip our feeble powers, and we should expect the machine to take control. So these apocalyptic scenarios are with us since the 1950s by somebody whose scientific credentials cannot be doubted. So Turing is without any doubt one of the smartest people in the 20th century, the father of the modern computer. So let's take these 3 actions now. One is a strict version of materialism, in which thinking is really just computation. There's no magic involved in thinking. It's just a process, maybe chemical or neurochemical. The second is the Church-Turing theory, is that all thinkable problems can be explained in a universal way and fed into a machine that Turing called the universal machine, and we today call the Turing machine. And since a few years ago, your phone is a good example of this. So a Turing machine is just your phone today. So the brain is just a program. Every program can be written down. Hence, of course, the program must be in there somewhere, and they're potentially malevolent or vastly superior intelligence is also just a program. So let's take a concrete example just to have something to think about. Let's take us back to the 60s. Here's one of the earliest programs in artificial intelligence. Eliza pretends to be a psychoanalyst. How do you do? Please tell me your problem. My problem is I have too many slides. I have too many slides left. You say you have too many slides left? Yes. And tonight there is only vegetarian food. I see. Okay, now it doesn't really know what to answer. And this is not, so the entire source code of ELIZA is known since 1966. And you can probably find the place of the code where, what do you say? It answered I see, right? I see. So, okay. So here's the part of the code when it doesn't really know much else, when it doesn't really know how to react to my claim because it doesn't find any. If I say my father hates me or something, my mother hates me, she doesn't. Who else in your family hates me? Right? So it's a really simple thing. It's from 1966, and it's non-surprising what it does. And you can basically read the code and see what it does. You can also, of course, take the code and copy it, and let's I'm not going to look for all of it. And we can find it here. So we can find it in the Library of Turing. It's on page, here it is, defund Clador C. So here you can see the code, it's actually in the library somewhere. And this is of course not surprising, it should be there, right? And we can actually, I guess, even somewhere see the, I can't see that. Somewhere it tells you which shelf it's on. Here it is, it's a wall 2, shelf 2, volume 31 in this room. Right? So it's there somewhere. So Eliza is somewhere in the Library of Turing, and hence the malevolent superintelligence must also be there somewhere. So, right? The only way that an really evil AI can't be there is if my brain for some reason was the smartest thing thinkable, and it's not. Right? So there must be reside a description of a brain that is even smarter than me, and since it's there, we should then also be able to find it just systematically by looking at all programs. And computers like doing that, so let's just systematically, let's go back in time to the Big Bang and let's look at all programs. The first three are A, B, C, and then after a few milliseconds, I look at the program AA and so on, and after 1 second, I already found the first word, the ELIZA program. So how many seconds do I need until I have systematically found the ELIZA program? Well, this is where now our idea breaks down, because it would have gotten this far. So this is the insight you have to get now. So if I systematically, since the beginning of time, one program per nanosecond, evaluate all possible programs, then today, after 13.8 billion years, I would have arrived at the first 20 or so characters of this ELIZA program. Okay, so even though the ELIZA program resides somewhere in the Library of Turing, there's no chance that I will find it just by looking for it without any idea of where to go. So the Library of Turing is completely impossible to navigate, even though the monster's program resides there somewhere. So there is a monster in the Library of Turing, but there's no way we can find it. So the idea of this analogy should give you a way to have three apparently conflicting thoughts in your brain at the same time. One, you can accept that superintelligence is theoretically possible, in the sense that, no, this does not violate your intuition about what intelligence is. Right? Intelligence is just it's just an algorithm, it's just a program. You can have that position, I do. You can also think that superintelligence may be potentially monstrous, malevolent, or just indifferent, right? Rather than saying that superintelligence must, qua its superintelligence, be benevolent. People exist who have this position. I don't share that. Right? So superintelligence must not necessarily be friendly. But you can also, while having both of these positions in your head, also be completely blasé about it ever appearing. Right? This is my position. I think this is theoretically possible, and it will never happen, because I'm an algorithms person, and I think algorithmic problems are really, really hard. And this is my research work, trying to solve algorithmic problems. And just because something is theoretically solvable, that doesn't help me solve it at all. So the question is not about what exists in the Library of Turing, but how we navigate the Library of Turing. And I think this is a useful analogy to have. It's really about navigating this vast library of code without having help of any vector that shows us when we go in the right direction. So this leads me to my second analogy, which I also taken from a book, in this case a book by Dawkins, called Climbing Around Improbable. So Dawkins thinks about this landscape of various organisms. Some of them are peaks and some of them are not, and evolution is really good at climbing these mountains and constructing amazing things like the human eye, or just a fish eye, or any kind of eye. So evolution is one way of navigating these enormous spaces of possibilities, a way that, in the case of superintelligence, we seem to lack right now. But let me talk you through this idea as well. So I assume there is a landscape of cognitive competency, and in this landscape there is a single mountain, actually there could be many mountains, which I call Mount Improbable. We inhabit that mountain. Right? This is me standing on the top of the mountain of my own brain. There are maybe other brains which I can see. This is possible. I'm up here. And AI tries to also get up to that mountain. So it's done that since the 50s, when Turing was the first to realize that this is a possibility. And here's a quote by David Deutsch, father of quantum computing. In 2008, this is how much success the quest for machines that think had achieved in the 58 years following Turing's paper. And what does David Deutsch think? Nothing. Right? So in his view, and also in mine, by the way, AI research is stuck at the bottom of Mount Improbable, down here, and fails to get up even half a meter. And this, again, seems counterintuitive and does not gel with our idea of the amazing success that AI has clearly presented in the last decade. So since the last decade, you can do something like this. You can write a Hebrew phrase into Google Translate and get that translated into Estonian, and it just plain works. And it didn't do that 10 years ago. And so do we need to reevaluate Deutsch's claim? And I'll try to convince you that no, we do not need to reevaluate it. And let me take it slightly through another huge success in the last decade, namely machine learning. So here's a two-slide explanation of machine learning. So machine learning is an extremely simple algorithm that has been known since the 60s or something like that, called the artificial neural network. It's a childishly simple algorithm. Think of it just as a black box with knobs on it, which you can turn, knobs and dials and switches. And we can feed this black box pictures, like this picture of a gibbon, actually two gibbons, and then it's going to output either a panda or a gibbon. And in the beginning, this will be quite random. It will be defined by how we set those knobs. And then we fiddle around. We don't fiddle. We have a computer fiddle around with those knobs, just turning them up and down until consistently the machine returns gibbon whenever we show the gibbon picture. So that's not very hard. We just need always the output to be gibbon. And then we make it harder for the machine by feeding it a picture of a panda. It will probably then still say this is a gibbon, so we fiddle a bit again until it now accepts this is a panda picture. And then we do this with a new picture of a gibbon. Oopsie. And I have to tell Google that I don't want to play. Okay. New gibbon picture, fiddle a bit again until it's a gibbon. And the fantastic thing that we can do today and couldn't do 15 years ago is that we can do this a million times because we have millions of pictures of gibbons and pandas. And we simply didn't have that 10 years ago. So because of vast amounts of data that are suddenly available, this laughably simple algorithm suddenly works. And it didn't work 10 years ago. There's no algorithmic improvement. The entire improvement is due to massive data that we can now feed these laughably simple algorithms. I'm selling machine learning short here, but I want to make a point. Right? This is not about algorithmic improvement, it's entirely about improvement in access to large amounts of digitized information, in particular pictures of gibbons and pandas. So after a million times, the thing is able to separate the gibbon pictures from the panda pictures. And then the fantastic thing happens, when I show it a new panda picture it hasn't seen before, it's going to say panda. Right? And this is amazing, mind-blowing. I mean, I would have lost a lot of money if I had done this 10 years ago. This actually works. It's an embarrassment to people like me. So I'm always morally offended by this, but it bloody works. And it does so probably by recognizing very, very tiny parts of the picture that are typical of all the panda pictures, and it does a pretty good job of recognizing pandas. So far, so good. And you might, at this point in time, think, oh, it got panda and gibbon. Right? It actually understands what's going on. But it doesn't, because I can show this network this picture, and it will say given. Right? And we can't even see the difference. So we've taken the panda picture, done some very, very tiny tweaks in changing the coloration of some of the pixels, and now the exact same network says, oh, this looks very much like a given. So it doesn't get given. So has any of you figured out how this works? How does Google Translate work? How does it translate the left sentence to the right sentence? How would you do? I carefully chose 2 languages where there's little chance that any of you knows both. Can you guess? What would you do? Where?
In a dictionary or on the internet.
That's the problem you want to solve, right? You would look at, okay, so you would try to find out what these words mean, and then translate words, and then try to realize the sentence structure of Hebrew, which is crazy, I promise, and then try to translate that into Swedish, and then understand what the meaning means in Swedish, and then translate it using another dictionary to Estonian. That's exactly what Google Translate does not do. What does it do instead? Yeah?
Statistical lookup, it finds grammar.
Yeah, where does it look up? This is a sentence 3 in the Hebrew Bible. It's right here. This is let there be light. Right? So any of you, given a Hebrew Bible and an Estonian Bible, can verify that this is the correct translation. Okay, this is, I'm lying through my teeth now, but this is basically how Google Translate works. It has 238 translations of all the Harry Potter books. Whatever you type in Swedish, it's going to be somewhere in the Harry Potter books. Right? It's going to find that sentence and then look about it in another language and feed that back to you. Right? That's Google Translate. And again, Google Translate is mainly a question of having all these books digitized. So, my apologies to everybody who works with machine translation. Of course, much more is going on today. Right? But this is sort of day 1 of implementing Google Translate. After that, you use everything you know about linguistics and make it even better. But the point is, it never gets anything about what it translates. So here is Mount Improbable at Turing's time. It looked like something that could be climbed. But I think 1 generation ago, more people tried, and we realized how bloody tall this mountain is. Some people actually try to climb it from the top, right? Neuroanatomy and cognitive neuroscientists try to find out how we get down from there. That's also great. But we have made very little progress other than finding out how bloody tall this mountain is. And today, everybody has found another hill, the machine learning hill, and we're driving around on that, and the view is fantastic from there. We can do amazing things. But nobody is left here. There is no research being done in climbing Mount Improbable right now. All the research is done is driving around the ML hill. So the point I want to hammer home here, and again with apologies to everybody who works in machine learning, it's a very nice field, it's super interesting, and I'm being unfairly dismissive of it. But the point I want to make is that machine learning is inherently inductive. It does nothing else than learn from examples. Right? If you want industrial strength stereotyping, this is currently how Google and Facebook and Twitter censor your opinions, right? They just, oh, this looks like hate speech or hate speech. And nobody argues why this is hate speech, it's just a statistical inference. And it eschews explanation. There's no explanation at all there. So if machine learning is a path to superintelligence, that would be sort of very, very strange. It would be by accident, and my Library of Turing analogy should explain to you that the accident is extremely unlikely. Or everything we know about scientific progress is wrong. Right? We have a pretty good picture of how scientific progress works. It's done by hypothesis and rejection. Right? It's done by trying to explain something and then having that destroyed. And this is exactly not how machine learning works. So if there was a trajectory from machine learning to superintelligence, there would be sort of, not only would we be wrong about intelligence, we would also be wrong about scientific progress. We'd be wrong about everything. It's possible, but I find it unlikely. So, again, this analogy should help you to have 2 ideas in your head at the same time. We have made enormous, incredible, extremely surprising advances in AI, and we have made no progress towards superintelligence. Right? And I think these are surprising claims to have in your brain at the same time. And this is actually also what I believe. One tiny footnote, I think it's misleading to claim that worrying about superintelligence is like worrying about overpopulation on Mars for exactly that reason. There is a trajectory towards Mars right now. Current technology would logically, if we extrapolated, give us colonies on Mars. It doesn't violate anything about what we know about how hard it is to build stuff on Mars. Right, so I think this is a misleading way of rejecting worries about superintelligence. Instead, I would say that it's like worrying about overpopulation on the sun. Right? So overpopulation on the sun is not a consequence of current technological progress, no matter how far away it is. Right? It's a completely different direction. We would be wrong about many, many things if we were soon to build colonies in the sun. Okay, my third and final analogy. So what I've said so far is, I think, moderately, I speak with some authority there, even though I explain these things maybe in a fashion that is too brutal. What comes now is tentative, and I haven't thought this through. I give it to you here, basically for you to shoot it down. So we know that the following analogy for superintelligence is wrong. We should not think about the superintelligence like Asimov did, as a robot, because the robot is local, it is embodied, and it has values that are succinctly described, in particular in the famous 3 laws of robotics. Right? Because this kind of superintelligence is actually not really so bad, because a group of plucky heroes can just switch it off. And there are many other reasons for why this is wrong. So instead, I'm trying to give a careful description of what kind of superintelligence you should worry about. It's certainly networked and distributed everywhere. It's disembodied. It may actually reside, it may be partly cyborgs, maybe 50% of it may be humans with wires sticking out of their head. With really, really complicated decision-making processes. There's no page 1 with the 3 laws of robotic on there. And it controls critical infrastructure. It doesn't have to actually go to the nuclear power plant. It is the nuclear power plant. So this is a better model, and that's not a robot. And this is a better model because this thing is very, very powerful. It has immediate access to all the to weapons, for instance, and it's much cleverer than our plucky heroes. So everything they can think of, it can think of as well. And moreover, it has what AI researchers call instrumental convergence. No matter what it wants to do, whether it's evil or good or indifferent, it would be motivated to preserve its own survival. Right? That's sort of the first goal it has to have. It's impossible that this thing wants to be switched off. If it's good, it can't be switched off for moral reasons. If it's bad, it doesn't want to be switched off. So it's going to try to fight to survive, and it's going to acquire as many resources as it can, no matter what its other goals are. So this is a central and famous observation in AI, the current AI philosophy. So what is then the analogy to this thing that I want you to think of? What is this like? And here my claim is that the thing I described here on the right-hand side is a state. So the analogy I want to present to you now is that AI, we should think of AI as governance. And that makes, of course, Plato, the first big philosopher to think about this, an early AI researcher in the Republic. So Plato's Republic, a famous piece that describes how governance should work, and it's completely consistent with all these ideas here. Right? In particular, for instance, and Plato was very concerned with this, of course, is that the state is going to do everything it can to persist. Right? The idea that the state can be switched off by those it rules seems to be perverse. So if this analogy is right, then of course this opens up this field to basically political philosophy. And then if you're like me, you will of course reject every single idea that Plato ever had. Because the central idea of Plato, the central question that Plato asks is, who should rule? Right? That's what he is obsessed about. How do we decide who gets to rule this fantastic thing? And so Plato describes this perfect, benevolent, wise philosopher king, who, by the way, is probably himself. He thinks that ethics is something that can be understood like math, right? It exists somewhere in a Platonic set of ideals. There's somewhere the right ethics, and these can exist. We can recognize them, and we can understand them, and we can operationalize them. This is a very, very strongly Platonic thinking about ethics. And the concept good ethics actually makes sense, like triangle as an ideal form. And if you only get this right, then utopia wins. Right? It's a completely utopian viewpoint. And on the other hand, some knowledge is dangerous in the wrong hands. In fact, censorship is a moral imperative. So Plato spends a lot of time rationalizing censorship. So this is the Platonic view of governance, and people who are Platonists will think these things are good. I can't see the problem with them. Right? And Platonists are typically mathematicians, theoretical physicists, philosophers. Right? So this is, I'm trying to psychoanalyze the people, Plato and everybody who likes Plato. And of course, so if you're like me, then this gives you, this makes you very, very afraid. Because this is the direct step towards totalitarianism, of course. And this idea has been formulated clearest by the Austrian philosopher Karl Popper in The Open Society and Enemies. So on one side you have the Platonic idea where everything is about finding the right set of values and then building a power structure that maintains these values. And Popper posits that this is the wrong question. As soon as you ask who should rule, you're already basically building the gulag. So the question in itself is morally corrupt. Instead, you should ask, how can we organize political institutions so that bad or incompetent rulers can be prevented from doing too much damage? So it's inherently negative, fallible, defensive. And this, of course, then leads him to write this fantastic book that is the strongest defense of liberal democracy that we know. And once you adopt this mindset, then basically, depending on which side you're on, you will be positively inclined towards some solutions and others you will reject. I've tried to write them down here. So on the Platonic side, which I don't like, you would like surveillance, security. You would solve security problems by obscurity, by hiding the weaknesses. You would have nothing against machine learned decision making. Censorship is great. Actually, it's a moral imperative. And everything should be about preventing mistakes. You should build your good government from nothing. And the Popperian view then contrasts this, in that the only object that deserves privacy is the individual, that you should build, for instance, security through openness, that decisions should be made by transparent rules that we can read, for instance, a law or an algorithm in code, rather than just some knobs on a machine learning black box. You would have principled defense of free speech, and you don't want to present mistakes, but you want to build systems that are resilient to mistakes. So I think these things map very well to... So this is my best attempt to write something that is simultaneously true of the Popperian view of liberal democracy, and also good practice in how to handle an artificial intelligence. The only thing I can't translate back is the role of free elections. I simply don't know what to write here, and this may simply be because that's actually the big problem. Help me. What should this be? This should exactly be what we don't know how to do. How to switch it off. And this also then leads me to the weakness, of course, of my analogy. So where does the governance analogy fail? So here was my governance analogy. The thing I've swept under the carpet is, of course, that my description of governance here, or of the AI, avoids it being superintelligence. Right? Government being superintelligent is exactly not an aspect of the states as we know them. So I'm cheating here, but I'm cheating in exactly the place where I want to cheat. So the story I'm telling you here is consistent and I think makes sense, except for the one point that I don't buy, namely the possibility to actually have a superintelligence. So to sum this up, the analogy of AI as a governance problem, not as a question of computer science or ethics, but as a question of political philosophy, makes concrete suggestions that we can and should implement now. Right? It helps us to do the right thing now, and it works perfectly in our current environment, which smells right. It's also internally consistent in that both the epistemology of the first part of my talk, where I'm strongly aligned with Popper's view of scientific progress by rejection of hypotheses. That, and that's of course no surprise, is also strongly consistent with the idea of how governance should work. So this smells right, I think. It tells us what to do now, and it can be reduced to one single concept, maybe fallibilism, or if you want, Popper, two books of Popper. Right? Everything here can be written down in about 1,400 pages. Yeah. And finally, and I think this is a strength, these suggestions posit nothing about the plausibility of apocalyptic AI scenarios. Whether or not you buy that this will actually happen, you can do something now, and I think we should. So this reasoning helped me to end up in a position where I learned to start worrying and love apocalyptic AI scenarios. And with this, I end my talk.
Okay, first you, then you, then you. Yeah, we have some time.
So my question is it possible that AI kill everybody without being super intelligence? That is it possible to construct narrow AI which kill everybody? Because maybe it is not so complex task.
Yes. So this is the famous paperclip apocalypse of Bostrom, where an indifferent AI, or actually even a benevolent AI, it died, now it died.
You want to mention this one?
Now I can shout. Will kill you because it would make sense to maximize its computational power. So even if I ask it for something completely simple, like make exactly 1,000, as many paperclips as possible, it's going to start by transforming you into paperclips. If I'm more precise and say, no, I meant 10,000 paperclips, it says, okay, then it makes sense for me to transform you into a hard disk.
But you don't need to be super intelligent to kill me.
No,
so
absolutely.
And then your argument against superintelligence don't prevent apocalyptic scenarios.
No, I want to prevent the apocalyptic scenario whether or not superintelligence is plausible.
There was a question over here.
I was going to ask why some people like Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Stephen Hawking are quite concerned and you're not. Any thoughts?
If you read them carefully, some of those people are concerned about AI in exactly the same way that I am concerned about AI. Right? There are all these things which happen right now, autonomous killer robots, automatic censorship, surveillance, all these things are very, and of course the enormous impacts on labor market, which means that we must rethink redistribution of wealth. All of these things are real right now and very, very important and should be talked about without, and then when you read that newspaper article, there's invariably going to be a picture of Schwarzenegger. Yeah, but that's not Bill Gates' fault. Elon Musk, I'm less sure about.
So, Kai?
So you offered us several analogies. If I may offer one of my own, I think I could map all of your arguments about the impossibility of superintelligence to what somebody might have said about the possibility of heavier than air flight in the 1800s. Like, yes, it may be possible to have some configuration of matter that flies, but it's too hard to find how to yes, there has been a lot of progress in hot air balloons and zeppelins, but those are nothing like the way birds fly and so on. And there's that famous quote by Lord Kelvin, I believe, about how powered and flight is going to be impossible. I do grant that your argument is reasonable in convincing us that current progress in machine learning isn't strong evidence about the possibility of superintelligence in the near future, but I think you're somewhat conflating plausibility with probability of it being near. I don't think most people who are concerned about AI risk are necessarily assuming that the superintelligence will happen like right next year or that it will follow as a result of the current machine learning boom. In fact, many of the arguments that Bostrom draws on in his superintelligence book were discussed and made even before the current machine learning boom.
Okay, so thank you. Among other things, for actually making, very loyally describing my point, particularly about the misunderstandings I try to avoid. So yeah, I only have 35 minutes. There are many, many pathways to superintelligence that I have not addressed. I've only tried to address a few of them. Others I find perfectly thinkable. But I guess the first take-home message of my talk is that we can be operational now without having a discussion about plausibility. The second is that there are some arguments for plausibility which I reject, but then you're right, there are plenty of other arguments for plausibility that need to be explored.
We're running out of time, so
Stefan, can you make your question really quick?
I'm afraid it's a bit complicated, but do I still have time? Or?
we have 1 minute. We have 1 minute.
We will make this, we can do this later.
I saw a question up there. Yeah.
Might take a minute. So, what was it? You said that you don't think simply extrapolating current machine learning trends would give you true artificial intelligence. What do you think is necessary for true artificial intelligence that you really reject from this extrapolating machine learning?
Short answer, I don't know. Long answer, again, completely consistent with Popper. If we ever get there, there's only one way of getting there, and that is refutations of hypotheses. Right? So if we ever get to an understanding of cognition or intelligence or agency or explanation that is so good, then we have solved all the other problems on its way. So that's an argument made by David Deutsch, and I like that very much. So it would be very surprising if the hardest engineering problem of all time, namely the construction of a universal explainer, which is my favorite way of thinking about superintelligence, a thing that explains stuff. That's what you and I are. If we could build that artificially, that would be the greatest engineering feat we've ever done. It would be very surprising if we achieved that feat by doing something else than what we've done so far, namely the method of scientific process laid out by Popper. Everybody take a drink every time I say Popper. Yeah. So, but it just boils down to I don't know. But neither does anybody else.
Well, thank you very much.